Are you in your 20s and looking for some savings advice, or have you just graduated school and wondering now that you're making some real money, how do you save? I'm going to cover all of that, how you can save in your 20s, coming up right after this. Welcome back to the channel, guys. If you're new here, my name is Sean. I'm covering my journey to financial freedom on this channel. So if you're into personal finance topics, please consider subscribing. So maybe you just graduated or you're just starting your first job in your 20s. If you're in your 20s, this is an exciting time. You've got your brand spanking new diploma or degree. You're making some real money. Finally doing something that pays over minimum wage. It's pretty exciting. But before you spend it on boats and hoes, I'm gonna go through a concept called the 50-30-20 rule that'll help you save money in your 20s. The 50-30-20 rule is kind of an interesting concept. I actually didn't know about this when I was in my 20s. I sort of wish I did. It's a rule that's coined by Senator Elizabeth Warren. She used to teach it as a bankruptcy professor, but it essentially means taking 50% of your income every month and spending it on your needs, 30% on your discretionary or your wants, and 20% going to savings. The 20% comes from a rule of thumb that at 5% interest, this gives you a shot at retiring comfortably when you get to retirement age. So I'm gonna show you an example. I'll make a pie chart. We'll dive into this example and we'll see what you guys think. So let's say you take home about $4,000 a month after your taxes. I know that's not always realistic, but it's just easy math this way. At $4,000 a month, $2,000 is covering your needs. So that's going towards your rent and your groceries and your transportation. Next, your discretionary spending would be about $1,200 a month, which actually isn't too bad. That's about $300 a week to spend on movies, concerts, entertainment, whatever it is that you want to do for fun. Which leaves the 20%, which is about $800 a month that you should be putting into a savings account, or actually more of an investment account. I'm gonna go now into each one of these categories and touch a little bit about what you should include in them, and then we'll talk a little bit about creative ways you can sort of reduce your expenses in each one. So this pie chart is basically your monthly income. I've split it up into the 50-30-20. So first let's talk about the needs. So your needs are things like your rent, your car, bus transfers and tickets, and electricity, keeping the lights on, that kind of thing. So this is a category where, depending on how much you make, it may not be enough to cover everything you need. However, there are some things you can do to kind of get creative here. For instance, your rent, you could look at, instead of living somewhere on your own, renting out a room or getting a roommate. This is where you'd be like renegotiating your cell phone plan, taking transit to work instead of buying a car. This section of the pie is really like, if you think of it as a business, like operating costs. So you want to be as efficient as you can with this section of the pie. And if you can get it to 50% or even less, that's even better. I have lots of videos on this channel with tips on how to save money, so I'll link to some of them right now. The next section is discretionary spending. That is the green section in the pie chart. This is the first place I would go to see where I could save some money. This includes things like concert tickets, movies, buying video games. Anything that you would really do for entertainment is sort of optional. If you're having trouble covering your needs, I would start to trim down some of your discretionary spending to be able to cover your needs. One area that I want to be clear on though here is food. If you're going out and spending money in restaurants, I would put that in the discretionary section of this budget, but if there are groceries, I put them in the needs. Restaurants are an easy place to cut down and save hundreds of dollars a month, because I know Natalie and I, we love to eat out, but it does add up over time. So if you can reduce how much you eat out, even if you just go to once a week, you'd be surprised how much you would save if you're used to going out three or four times a week. Finally, if you've optimized your needs and your discretionary spending, you should look at putting some money away in savings, or even better, in investments. So 20% seems like a lot up front, I'll admit. But if you're able to reduce some of your discretionary spending to put some money in here, that would be great. Now, if 20 seems like a ton to start with, try with just 1 or 2% a month and slowly, gradually increase that as you get more comfortable. You'll find 1 or 2% of your income, you don't really feel the difference, and then just start increasing it as you go. If you really can't, start with a couple percent, and then as you go through your 20s and you get raises and increase your income, add those raises to this section until you hit that 20. Just make 20 the goal and then start small and work towards it. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're finding this helpful so far, I'd really appreciate a sub. If you know someone who is going into their 20s, share this video with them, share the channel with them. It would be greatly appreciated. If I really think about this rule, if I could rewrite it, I'd probably call it the 50-20-30 rule, because I feel like it prioritizes your savings over your wants, which is probably how I would approach this. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't have fun in your 20s. It's actually very important to do your traveling, go on tons of adventures, just do as many experiences as you can in your 20s. Discover what you're passionate about, what you like and don't like, meet as many people as possible and learn from them. That would be actually my top advice for your 20s. But if your income allows, be responsible with your saving and investing in your 20s. I wish that I knew what I know now about personal finance in my 20s. So if you can afford it, I would even suggest setting up that automatic withdrawal to take money out of your checking account and into your saving or investing account automatically. If you never see it, you're not going to be tempted to spend it. So if you could set that up in your 20s and get used to establishing that habit up front, you're never going to know the difference when you go on and you're able to earn more income and save even more money, and you're gonna go 10 years down the road and then realize, wow, I've saved up a pretty nice nest egg of cash here. So why am I so adamant about starting this in your 20s? Well, let's use our example of the $4,000 a month. I'm gonna go to a website and talk to you a little bit about compound interest and how that works. So you guys might have heard the concept of compound interest. It's just when you put your money into some kind of account where it starts to grow, and after a year, it grows a certain amount. Now that is your new amount of money that you have, and it grows and it keeps growing year after year and compounding. That's a very, very terrible explanation, but here's how it works. In our example, we're starting out with no money. So our initial investment is zero. We said that we would dedicate 20% of the income a month to our savings. So here's $800. Now I'm going to use an interest rate of 7%. It doesn't really matter. This illustration will still work, but 7% has been the average that the stock market or the S&P 500 has performed. I use that as a rule of thumb. For this calculation, I'm just going to say that the interest is compounded yearly, which again, because we're saying our investment makes 7% a year, it calculates the interest after the year. Now, if you're 22, and I want to use this example for, let's say, retiring at 50. Well, you've got 28 years to grow this money. So if I hit calculate, by the time you're 50, if you contribute 800 bucks a month, you don't increase it or decrease it, you just stay at 800, you'll have 800 grand in your bank account. 530,000 of that 800 grand won't even be money that you put in. That's just the interest that you've earned for doing nothing. Now, let's contrast that with somebody who starts doing this when they're 30 years old instead of 22. So when you're 30, you're gonna lose 8 years. You're gonna have 20 years with everything else being equal to grow your investment. And now you can see you only have $406,000. So those 8 years cost you almost half what your nest egg would be at the age of 50. So that's why I say, like, start early, because even though you don't think you're putting away a ton of money at the time it has to grow is really what's powerful. If you can get into this habit early and start saving in your 20s, like I was saying earlier, you have the potential to make a ton by the time you're 50 years old. And the money you invest in your 20s has the most time to grow, which will make you the most money. So the key here is time. You have the most time in your 20s, which is why it's important to start investing, because you don't get that time back. If you guys want to play around with this calculator, I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Finally, if you're in your 20s, you might be wondering, what's the magic number I should be shooting for by the time I'm 30? Well, I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in the next video, because I also wanted to chat about some of the milestones and another way you could think about how to manage getting through your 20s when it comes to money. We're gonna talk about dealing with wedding rings and weddings, student loans, and building up your emergency fund in your 20s. All of that I will try to cover next week in next week's video. Till then, hope you guys have a great week, spread the wealth, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Freedom on this channel, so if you're into personal finance topics, please consider this. This section is the first place I would go to see where I could. This is the first, oh my God. Saving in your 20s and just not worry about it So if you can get this habit,